Come along with me. I'll give you a tour. By Amy Kurman. If you have ever watched a common fly in flight, you will have noticed that it does not fly in a straight trajectory. Rather, the route is rectangular. A fly will swiftly zoom away from you to make it across the room. Next, he will take a precise turn to the right and soar free for a short spell, followed by a quick turn back again, where he will pass by the open window. He will then make another right, just long enough to buzz your ear, so that you swipe at the air and slap the side of your own head, even though he is already out of your reach, off to create a new rectangle. This flight pattern suits me very well, since I live in a train, mostly in the corridor of a sleeping car. My train is empty until the big tents are dropped and folded, and the circus performers move back in and pack into their cabins like salted sardines, en route to the next destination. This is when my personal circus begins. Come along with me. I'll give you a tour. Miguel, the sword swallower, resides in one of the tiny compartments. I dislike Miguel. He is a grumpy sort, who talks to nobody. Folks presume that Miguel is a mute, the cause and effect of stuffing one too many flaming swords down his gullet. Perhaps, but I would hazard a guess that it is simply because he's antisocial and chooses not to talk. Miguel spends his time on the rails with stacks and stacks of books. He lays around in the nude and reads. He scowls with his caterpillar eyebrows when I crawl over his threshold and fly into his closet of a room. He pulls from under his cot a long, skinny sword and cuts at the air with the steely blade, intent on splitting me in two. I outmaneuver. As I said, I dislike Miguel, so I do not often visit him, except on occasion to spit into his coffee cup when he gets up to piss out of the window. Skipping forward a few doors, we arrive at one of the larger cabins that is occupied by Braheen, the black-as-coal snake charmer with lacteal teeth that look like a string of pearls, rounded from years of chewing reeds, and Olabisi, his creamy caramel common-law wife, who jingles when she walks. She is a belly dancer, but you have perhaps already guessed that. They have entertained on the circuit since escaping from Egypt, after a bounty was placed on their heads for being unwed lovers some 20-odd years ago. They travel together with 3 deceptively dangerous yet venomoid Naha'ahe cobras, a cage full of rats for sustenance for the cobras, and a devilish monkey who they call Karldan, Arabic for monkey. I cannot fly near Olabisi because she fans herself, not in a bashful way, but because she suffers devastating hot flashes, especially in the tight quarters of the train. She sleeps during the day, usually on the floor with the clammy cobras wrapped around her body. One such afternoon, Braheen had dozed off on the cot, with Karldan curled up on the pillow next to his head. I crawled into their room through the open transom. Monkey heard me buzz and opened one eye and then the second. He decided that it would be a good day to release the rats from their prison, open the cabin door, and then quickly curl back up on his master's pillow, feigning innocent slumber. The cobras raised up their heads in excitement, but in a blink the witty rats dispersed throughout the train. The rodents scaled up the wall, down the corridor, pancaked beneath passageways under the cabin doors, and onward to the contiguous train cars. Chaos ensued. Everybody on the train was screaming. Drunken clowns ran from their chambers and bounced off of the walls as they tried to catch their tiny dogs, who were yipping and yapping as they chased after the rats. Miguel ran naked through the train, waving a sword. Olabisi yelled at Braheen to fetch the snake food lest they all starve. Monkey remained in a ball, sound asleep. The conductor, who was a stickler for order, had to call emergency and commanded the engineer to halt the train. During the emergency stop, all the hooved, pawed, and footed on board were able to get out to stretch their legs in the fresh air, while a few searched for the escapees. One rat reached the dining car and got stuck on a glue trap under the oven. I fed for free on the delectable carcass. I do like that mischievous little monkey. The acrobatic triplets are this way. The gals are clones of one another, a 3-way mirror. They share the same soprano voices. They dress identically, even when not on the trapeze. They sneeze alike, all at once, and frequently because they are allergic to dogs. The three speak in a language that only they, and in my infinite way I, understand. They fight ferociously, and then make up in an instant as though they had never argued. This morning I watched as two of them fought tooth and nail because one had purportedly put on the other's frock. She cried tears of rage and threw shoes, until the other smacked her and said something to the effect of, "I am not wearing your dress because you are me, therefore you are wearing it. Look at me. Who am I? Am I not you?" The only aspect of distinction between the three is that two are as frigid as the tundra, and one is a closeted nymphomaniac. Almost all of the men on the train have had her by cover of night. Brahim and the straight-laced conductor have had a taste, but naked Miguel is a regular target, because all she needs to do is slip into his cabin and hop on. None of the paramours dare speak to her in the light of day. Nobody on the train knows the triplets' names. That would be futile. So if he were to speak to the wrong girl, he would get an icy lashing in an undetectable tongue. I come in here when I want to watch the fights. Follow me to two cabins combined into one for Wojciech, the gargantuan strongman, and his daughter Ewieka. Wojciech is quite literally a giant. He is also afflicted with alopecia universalis, so consequently there is not a single hair on his enormous tattoo-covered body. After pulling boulders and lifting leaden weights, his act culminates in walking around the ring carrying an adolescent elephant on one shoulder and a cow on the other. His muscles stiffen by the time the train carries off to the next city. When he hits his room, he steps into a vat where Ewieka rubs him down with mineral oil to massage his sore arms and back, and to remove his tattoos. You see, Ewieka became a non-verbal savant after tragically hitting her head on a trip and fall down a stone staircase when she was a youngster back in Slovakia. When she awoke in her hospital bed, she immediately signaled for a pad and a charcoal pencil. Rather than write a message, she began to draw with the skill of an expert artist. From then on, she was compelled to draw at all times, otherwise she would become anxious and walk in circles. Her mother left soon after the accident, which made for hard times for Wojciech. He ran out of money to buy paper for Ewieka, so he let her use his hairless skin as her canvas. Wojciech lumbered about town doing heavy work, covered in drawings worthy of palace walls. One day, while he was demolishing a building from its foundation with his bare hands, he was spotted by a circus scout, who pulled him aside and told him of an opportunity to join up with his traveling circus overseas. He could lift anything that he wanted for double the pay and free room and board on the tour. This bore the tradition of Ewieka creating a new design on her father while traveling between destinations. Ewieka shows me great compassion. She is the only passenger who truly notices me and never tries to smash me to smithereens. She chortles whenever I am near her, pets me ever so gently with her pinky, and studies me intensely. She lets me walk up and down her soft arm, traversing her goosebumps while she draws in her notebook. On one particular journey, I was awed when a gigantic image of myself emerged between Wojciech's shoulder blades. She had captured every detail of my being. Imprinted on his back were the stripes down my own back, the intricate veins in my wings, the standing hairs on my thorax and legs. She created the exact color of my eyes by poking her finger with the pin to draw blood. Dare I say that I love Ewieka? Oh, but that brings to mind when the train embarks for the next town. The performers return to the train after everyone has received their pay and purchased provisions for the trip. The equipment is loaded and the animals are secured. The train sets off, and the vibe is kinetic. As the train chuffs through the night, the occupants blow off their own steam with revelry. Most of the sleeper cabin doors are opened, and the corridor fills with music and song, hugging, juggling, hookah smoking, and shared swigs from canteens and flasks. I am on my own junket here. What with the doors open, I make sweeping rectangles and fearlessly land with abandon anywhere I please, gobble up anything that strikes my fancy. I learned my lesson, though. not to stay exposed for too long on party night. The vapor of salty sweat and ethanol fills the air and becomes ether to me. That lesson was learned when I blacked out mid-flight and fell into the grooves of a window sash. Luckily, the window was closed, so I was not sucked out into the abyss. I awoke on my back, kicking, but only rotating, because my wings were flapping on the cold, dewy metal. I had not a clue where I was. My head throbbed. Now, when the festivities start to reach a peak, I find the nearest closed cabin. I came upon the lion tamer's shut door, so I made my way through a gap. I had to adjust my eyes because the cabin was dimly lit by just one candle. I heard a sharp thwack, and in an instant was sure that I was being hunted with a swatter, like the one that the cook runs after me with in the kitchen car. I heard another, and a swack-thwack, heavy breathing, and a series of rapid thwacks. I slowly patted my wings and found that I was unscathed. As my ocelli adjusted to the ambient light, I saw, in the center of the room, Curtis, the lion tamer, sitting on a stool wearing his shiny black boots. The ringmaster, Olaf, was prone across his lap, receiving a walloping on his rosy arse from a crop that Curtis uses on the lions. There is a certain respect that is due to the leader of the circus, so I slowly backed my way out and made haste to safety in Kajsa's darkened cabin. Kajsa, a Nordic beauty with a translucent gaze that sears a hole through even the hardest heart, occupies a small sleeper near the back. The rear cabins are situated nearest the train car that specifically houses the hooved animals. Her circus job is to perform daring tricks on her impossibly white steed as he gallops around the ring and rears to towering heights as she does straddle splits across his back. Every little girl watching with mouth agape wants to be her. Every spectating father, grandfather, and brother has a pressing desire for her, but her attention is reserved only for her beloved horse. On the train, she sidles between cars to visit him several times a day and often at night. She interacts with no man. When the circus was camped in a big city, she was courted by a handsome businessman who wore duds from the finest haberdashery and smelled like a glen of pine trees. He came to watch her every performance and took her to dazzling places every night in hopes of just one kiss. But Kajsa was pure and would save herself for holy matrimony. Time was short, and the circus was soon leaving, so the gentleman vowed to marry her and placed a gold foil cigar ring on her finger, betrothing himself to her beneath the harvest moon. He promised to wed her in the church when the train came back through town. He told her that in the meantime he would procure an estate for them in the country and have it ready upon her return, and that her horse would have a spectacular arena. He implored that to prove their faithfulness, they must consummate the moon marriage that evening, before the train left. She gave herself to him in the back of a taxi with enraptured passion while the driver went for a cigar puff. She wore that paper ring as if it were precious gold and performed the rest of the tour with an unbridled vitality that made her all the more radiant. When the train chugged back through the big city, her pseudo-husband was nowhere to be found. No life in the country waited for her. From that day, Kajsa lost all desire for the love of humankind. For that matter, she pays no attention to me whatsoever. I can sit on her nose for all she cares. Kajsa's cabin is rather dismal. She sops up her tears with her long blonde braid before making off to be with her steed. I never follow her to the hooved quarters. There are many, many more flies there than this fly cares to be around. It looks as if we are just about at the offloading point for the next big show. Soon the train will be empty. The old girl will be docked in the nearest rail yard for a week or 3. I will have this sleeping car all to myself. I'll fly my geometric rectangles until I reach the very last cabin. The animal caretaker occupies it during our trips. He is a generous fellow who plans ahead for my well-being. Each night, after shoveling out the animal cars, he kicks off his treaded boots into the corner of his cabin. Each morning, when he puts on the boots, the muck and fodder that was stuck in the treads has dried and shrunken a bit, so it crumbles out and lands in a pile that grows each day. When my muses are away at the big top tents, a bountiful care package from the caretaker is left here, just for me.